You don't marry someone with the intention of spending your evenings running through every minor discrepancy in their tales, but that was my reality. There were signs, indications that my wife, Kara, was engaging in extramarital affairs. She always had an excuse. Late-night errands that took longer than they should. Shopping trips for things we didn't even need. Impromptu get-togethers with friends I'd never heard of before, and each time I questioned her, she had a response. Always composed, always sensible. But when everyone has an excuse, you start to understand the truth isn't found in what they say, but in what they won't say. The biggest red flag? Her phone. It was always with her, face down, locked with a password I wasn't allowed to know. If she ever forgot it somewhere, she'd run back to grab it in an instant, as if it were a ticking time bomb. She never let me borrow it, not even for something as simple as looking up a number. And the strangest part? She erased everything, every call log, every message, even our own conversations. Who does that? What kind of married woman needs to wipe her phone clean every single day? I wasn't stupid. I knew something was happening, but there's a difference between knowing and proving. I considered hiring a private investigator, but let's be honest, those guys are expensive, and we weren't exactly swimming in money. If I wanted answers, I had to find them myself. So I started watching, paying attention, tracking patterns, looking for inconsistencies, anything that might validate the suspicion gnawing at my gut. But she was good. Too good. Then, one evening, I got a message from a friend. Just a simple link and 4 words. You need to see this. My stomach dropped as I clicked. It was only 20 seconds long, but that was all it took. Kara, my wife, in a private session, naked, moaning, wrapped around another man. At first, I thought it couldn't be real. Maybe it was a deep fake. Maybe someone was trying to ruin her. Then I realized the truth. Her secret lover had accidentally posted it on Snapchat. For a few minutes, the video was only a mistake. But the internet doesn't forget. It spread fast, beyond Snapchat, onto leak websites, gossip forums, even Twitter. Strangers were reposting it, analyzing it, joking about it. The worst part? Some of my friends saw it before I did. I confronted Kara immediately. She denied everything, acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. So I showed her my phone. I showed her proof. She just stared, lips quivering, eyes wide. Then she scoffed, shook her head, laughed. She actually tried to tell me it was Photoshop, that someone was trying to destroy us. I almost laughed myself. Kara, I said calmly, it's a video. She had nothing left to say. I had already contacted a lawyer. I filed for divorce immediately. Adultery. She tried to talk me out of it. Tried to beg. But I wasn't listening. The woman I loved was gone. The moment I saw that video, she ceased to exist. But there was one last question that ate me alive. The child I had raised for 2 years, was he even mine? I didn't want to believe Kara could betray me on every level, but I couldn't trust her anymore. So I kept my suspicions to myself. I collected a few strands of hair from my son's brush, sent in my own DNA sample, and I waited. The results arrived days later. I opened the envelope, my hands shaking. Probability of paternity, 0%. My brain refused to accept it. 2 years. 2 years of love, of sleepless nights, of lullabies and bedtime stories. Gone. By the time we appeared in court, I was done. I handed over the DNA results alongside the video. Let the magistrate see exactly what kind of woman I had married. It was over. Legally, I was free. But Kara, she wasn't happy with what she got in the settlement. She wanted more. I didn't care. She could have taken everything, but I wouldn't have stayed. Money, property, assets. None of it mattered. I had already lost everything. So without another word, I walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. I left the city, cut off every mutual friend, changed my number, deleted my social media. As far as I was concerned, that version of me was dead. Some people think moving away is a fresh start. But pain doesn't just disappear because you're somewhere new. It follows you, lurks in the quiet. I tried to keep busy, picked up new hobbies, woodworking, hiking, even cooking, something I'd never had time for before. But I couldn't trust myself to love again. I had given my heart to a woman who burned it to ashes. And I wasn't about to hand the pieces to someone else. For years, I lived cautiously, alone. I convinced myself it was better this way. Then one day, I met Elaine. I didn't think much of it at first. We bumped into each other at the mailbox, the supermarket, small moments. Then, one evening, she knocked on my door. She had locked herself out of her house and needed to use my phone. That's when I saw it. The look in her eyes. The same look I had seen in the mirror for years. Elaine had lost her husband in a car accident. She wasn't ready to talk about it, and I didn't push. But over time, we did. Over coffee, over long conversations, we shared our pain. And for the first time in years, I opened up. She didn't pity me. She didn't judge. She just listened. And maybe that's why it happened the way it did. Love wasn't the goal, but love found us anyway. Slowly, cautiously, we built something together. A life, a family. And then, our daughter was born. The moment I held her, I knew. I was finally the father I had always wanted to be. It's been nearly 20 years since then. This morning, my wife and daughter left to visit family. I was alone, in the house, enjoying my coffee, appreciating the quiet I had learned to cherish. Then, the phone rang. I didn't anticipate anyone, but I also didn't consider it as I made my way to the door. My breath caught the instant I swung it open. Standing in front of me, stuck in my throat, was a young man in his 20s. His demeanor was strained, as was his posture, unreadable. But I wasn't frozen by that. His face was in place, and it looked like gazing into my younger self's mirror. We didn't speak for a moment. Then, in a steady voice with a hint of something beneath it, the young man said, "Hello, sir. I've been miles away." My thoughts raced as I searched for a link, but the only distance I had ever been aware of wasn't this. Perhaps I was following my instincts to close the door, but my interest, or perhaps something more profound, stopped me. Without saying anything, I moved aside. I stepped back automatically as he walked in. Making a cup of coffee for him, I watched as he sat opposite me at the kitchen table, observing me. I had spent almost 20 years burying my past, and now, within minutes, it had arrived, rapping on my door. Worse still, I had to confront it. The silence between us was suffocating. I had no idea what to say. I waited for him to speak. Finally, he said, "I've been trying to find you for years." His fingers clutched the coffee cup as if it were the only thing anchoring him. Every cent I earned, I put into finding you. I scowled, confused as to why. Then his gaze met mine. He laughed. Because you're my dad. I shook my head. I'm not, I said. I had made peace with that years ago. Miles didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table. Our eyes met. Read this. I opened the folder grudgingly, and my stomach dropped. The first page was a medical report. When Miles was 5, he needed an emergency blood transfusion. But there was an issue. His blood type didn't match the man he had been calling Dad. Confused, the doctors had ordered a DNA test. The results? The man wasn't his father. I turned more pages. As Miles grew older, he had taken multiple DNA tests to confirm the truth. Each one attested to the same fact. I was his biological father. My vision blurred. I couldn't believe it. But the evidence was in my hands. I pushed the papers aside. You can go now, I muttered, barely audible. Miles remained, motionless. Then in a whisper he said, please. We locked eyes. Don't abandon me like you did when you were 18. Years ago, I would have told him to leave, but something about him made me pause. I exhaled. Fine. One last test, I said. If it proves I'm not your father, I never want to see you again. Miles nodded with an unreadable expression. The next morning, we visited the best lab in the city. No room for doubt. I watched as they took our samples. The results were ready the next day. I opened the envelope. For 1 second, the words blurred together. Then, my vision focused. Paternity likelihood, 99%. The paper slipped from my hands. I had spent 18 years ignoring my own son. I looked up. Miles was watching me, waiting, hoping. For the first time in years, my defenses gave way. I wasn't sure what I felt. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Miles spoke. His voice was quiet, but heavy. He told me about the man he had called Dad. Kara never actually married him. The man had claimed Miles, but had never truly been there. There were no words of encouragement, no guidance, just a constant reminder that Miles was a burden. Hearing it made my stomach twist. Had convinced myself that walking away had been the right thing to do. That I had left behind a child who already had a father. But the truth was, I had abandoned my own flesh and blood, left him to survive in a home that never felt like his own. Then, Miles told me something unexpected. Kara regretted everything. She regretted pushing me away. She regretted the affair. She regretted choosing another man over me. As she grew older, she told Miles the truth. The truth about the DNA test. The truth about how I had left, never knowing the real story. How he had been searching for me, hoping I would return. Before I realized it, my face was wet. I had sworn not to cry, but my guilt was overwhelming. I left you, I finally said. I failed you when you needed me most. I'm sorry. I wasn't just apologizing. I was grieving the years I had lost, the birthdays I had missed, the moments he had spent wondering why his real father had never come, wondering if he wasn't wanted. He was silent for a long time. Then, he exhaled sharply and nodded. I was angry for a long time, he admitted. But I didn't come here to be mad. I came here to find my father. And for the first time in 18 years, I understood. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could still be his father. There was no instant reconciliation. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't waste any more time. I introduced Miles to my family. 2, his half-sister, who had grown up surrounded by love. When they finally met, she simply hugged him, a quiet gesture that said, "Welcome." My wife embraced him too. She knew my pain, and when she met Miles, it all became real. Weeks passed. We healed. Slowly, we built something new. We weren't perfect, and the years we lost would never be rewritten. But the future mattered more than the past. For the first time in a long time, I had hope. I had let my pain dictate my choices for too long. When my wife betrayed me, I walked away from everything, not just her. At the time, it felt like the only way to survive. I thought disappearing would heal me. I thought cutting all ties would erase the pain. But pain doesn't work that way. For 18 years, I convinced myself I had done the right thing. After all, the DNA test had said Miles wasn't mine. But the truth had layers. The test was wrong, and that mistake had cost me nearly 20 years. I missed his childhood, his birthdays, his struggles, his joys, everything. And worst of all, I could never get that time back. I tell you this story not for pity, but as a warning. When we're hurt, we become blind. We run. We try to escape. We forget. But in protecting ourselves, we may be causing deeper wounds, not just to us, but to the ones who need us most. If I had stayed, if I had looked deeper, I would have known the truth sooner. I wouldn't have let my son grow up believing I abandoned him. So if there's one lesson to take from this, always search for the way. Whole truth. Don't make life-changing decisions in anger. Ask questions, because sometimes what we believe is just a fraction of the story. I have a second chance. It won't erase the past, but it gives me a future with my son. And this time, I won't let anything take that away. Thank you for watching.